Okay, I'm just going to make the short video going through a couple of these modulation part writing questions for your e-learning stuff today. It's really not a new assignment. It's the one that I assigned on Monday for you to practice your modulations for pivot chord modulations, chromatic modulations, and or phrase modulations. So I'm just going to take you through one that's in a minor key and one that's in a major key to help you get you started on these. So there's two different types of questions here. One of them has the soprano line and bass line done for you, as well as the figured bass symbols in terms of like the inversion symbols. And then the second part of it is without the soprano line. So you actually have to create the soprano line and the inner voices. So we're going to start with this one, which is on page 155 of your packet. And it is number 4. If you look here, we're starting in the key of D minor with 1 flat. So you would want to always indicate that when you see that we're in D minor, indicate that key. And then that means you would start here with a D in the bass with nothing below it, which is root position 1 chord. Okay. And then you obviously repeat that for this measure. Now, what you need to look at here is where we have accidentals and where we have accidentals in the figured bass. And that's going to help you determine what's going on in terms of the key, original key, and the key that we're moving towards. Also, pay attention to when we have this 6/4 chord, because whenever you have 6/4 chords, that means they're being used in a specific kind of way. And in this case, you see we're going from E to A. And that followed by 5/3/7, which means 7th above the bass, which is held all the way through this measure. That would be E7, moving to an A chord. That means we're probably going to a 5/1 here, because it's a cadential 6/4 leading to a 5, to a 5/7, and then to the 1. That is going to indicate that where we are headed here is to A minor, because it sets up the cadence in the new key. So I would just put a minor 1 here and just kind of in parentheses put this as A minor, where we have modulated by the end of the example. Now, you need to figure out then, how do we get from D minor to the minor dominant A? Where does that key change occur? Your first inclination might be to say, oh, well, there's B naturals here and C sharps. And B naturals are indeed in A minor, where they're not in D minor. But the C sharp is not in A minor, obviously. So you got to think, what does that mean? Well, C sharp is the leading tone to D harmonic minor. So if you're just thinking we're still in D minor here, and there's a 6 below it, that means that the C sharp, 6 means first inversion triad, right? So that means that the note you're given here in the bass is the 3rd of the chord. And in D minor, that would make this a 5/6, leading tone going up to 1. So then what is this B natural doing here? Because that's I've talked over and over again about the C, in this case, the C sharp, but whatever the leading tone is in harmonic minor is not going to be in the key signature. We only have this 1 flat. But the 1 flat is natural here. And so you have to think through the fact that when we are in melodic minor, it's not only the leading tone that gets raised a half step out of the key signature, but also the 6th scale degree in melodic minor, which would make this not a minor 4/6 like it would be G, B flat, D, but with the B natural, it's a major 4/6, and that comes from the melodic minor. So both the B natural and the C sharp are being borrowed from D minor. So that takes care of what these accidentals here are doing with the B natural and the C sharp, but it doesn't help us necessarily understand how we're getting from D melodic minor to A minor. So when you look at this 6/4 chord here, this indicates that this is a cadential 6/4 chord leading to the minor. So this would be a 1/6/4, even though it's functioning more like a dominant because it has that 5th in the bass with that cadential 6/4 chord. This would be a major 5 because we have the sharp 3 would make this G sharp, which is the leading tone of A harmonic minor, and the natural 5. But in this case, instead of it being borrowed from the parallel major of D major with B natural, it's in this case being borrowed from the minor dominant, A minor. So that's what makes this question kind of tricky to answer, because this B natural is being used in two different ways, and they're both not in the original key signature. But in this case, it's giving you the 1-3-5 E, G sharp, B natural to give us that major triad on the dominant of the new key A minor, and then that would make this a 5-7. So then we need to think, what kind of modulation is this? Well, because D to E is not a half step, it's a whole step, it can't be a chromatic modulation. And because we're not ending a phrase and starting a new phrase here, that means we probably are dealing with some kind of pivot chord modulation. So you need to look at this chord that happens before the cadential 6-4 chord leads you into A minor. Look at this minor 1, D. If it functions as a tonic chord in D minor, how does it function in the key of A minor? Well, obviously in A minor, that would be a 4, which indeed is minor. The quality is minor in a minor key. So it would be the same quality, but now we're pivoting here into A minor, whereas this leads 5-1 in the old key, pivots to 4, and then the cadential 6-4, 5-1 in the new key. And that would be your chord analysis to provide you with that transition from D into A. And then you would just fill in these inner voices. So this first one is D, F, A. We have both these, which we would double. And then I would probably put the A here, and then put the F, which is the third of the chord here. You could even put a little passing tone if you want, leading up into here as a non-harmonic tone, and then going into the other one chord, just to give you some like variance in your melody here. Da da dum or da da dum. And then we have this chord, which is a 4-6, which means the notes we need are G, B natural, and D to give us that. We already have the G, we already have the B, and then you need to think, so obviously we need the D somewhere, which would make sense to keep it as a common tone in the alto. And then what do you put in the tenor? Well, you have, in addition to the complex thing that we're dealing with in terms of the melodic minor thing and modulation, we also have two consecutive first inversion triads, which means if we double the root or double the soprano in both of these, we're going to get G, A, and we're going to probably get parallel octaves. So what you should do is double the bass first, alternate doubling the bass and the soprano. So in this case, we would double the bass with the B natural, and then you would double the soprano with the A, and going back down to the A here. And then that would leave us with, we have A, C sharp, and we have the soprano doubled as the root of that chord, and that would leave us with the fifth, moving up by step, which gives us contrary motion in the inner voices, and then we do have the parallel motion in the outer voices, but those are parallel sixths, which is what you will typically get in two consecutive 6 chords. But because we alternated doublings, we didn't get parallel octaves. Okay, so then, regardless, even though we're pivoting here from the 1 to the 4, they're both minor chords, so we're still trying to create a DFA chord in both of those. Okay, so that would mean we would need to double the D, which we already have, and then we would need the F and the A. Keep the A as a common tone, then move to the F in the alto by step. Then we need to have the cadential 6-4 chord leading from the A 6-4, A, C, E, and we already have the E and the C, so we need A. And then we have to double the bass in 6-4 chords, so I would move this as a common tone, not move it, but keep it as a common tone, and then move down to the E in the alto, which would give you that 1-6-4. And then you could actually keep this E as a common tone and just keep it as a half note. The reason I put it as a half note is because the next chord also has an E in it, right? It's the root now of the 5. E, G sharp, B. And we already have the E doubled then, which was doubled in the 6-4 as the bass fifth of the chord, and now that is now the root of the chord, and we keep it doubled, and that means we're missing the G sharp, E, G sharp, B. So I'd put the G sharp here, and if you wanted to be a little fancy, you could create a little neighboring tone here, F sharp, back to the G sharp, and then on B, because now we obviously need one more beat here and one more note that we're missing on the E, G, B, D. The 7th of the chord needs to be put here as a quarter note in the alto, which would then lead us down to the C, because that 7th resolves down, and then this one would lead down then to the 5th of the chord, E. And then we get the D minor, moving to the A minor. That's the modulation. We're moving from D to A. So this would what it would sound like if we did it this way. And here's the pivot chord. It's the 1 in the old key, but the 4 in the new key. And now we're in A minor. We've cadenced now clearly in the new key. And then it could continue on in A minor after that point. Okay? So very easy modulation from D to the dominant minor A. You could also go to A major, obviously. If there was a sharp here, that would mean you would just be going to A major with a C sharp instead of a C natural, which would be totally fine as well. Okay, let's do one that doesn't have the soprano line done for you, and let's do one that's in major, just since we did one that was in minor before. So let's go all the way to page 156, the last exercise on that page, which is number 3, and all it is giving you here is a bass line. It doesn't give you the soprano. So now you have to figure out the chords, where the modulation occurs, what key we're moving towards, and create all 3 upper voices. So obviously we're starting in C major. It gives you that clearly. We start with the major 1, which it already analyzes you for there. So you're going to need C, C, E, G, and that chord to double the root. Then you get a 1, 6. We just move to the 3rd here. And then we have a 5 chord here with the G. So that's just like, obviously, that arpeggio C, E, G creates the roots of, or the roots of the 1 and the 5 with the 3rd instead of going 1, 3, 5, like tonic, median, dominant, which would be a horrible chord progression. We just use that bass note 3rd of the chord and make it a 1, 6. Now, because we're moving up by 3rd here in the bass, and it's the same function, tonic, the best thing to do in the soprano line here would to create a voice exchange. There is an E in this chord, and of course there is a C in this chord. So I would just switch those and put the E here in the soprano and move down to the C, and that creates what we call voice exchange. So that's a really good technique when we're dealing with the same chord, but with a different inversion. And then, you know, you can fill in these inner voices here with the 5th of the chord there, and then put the root doubled in the tenor, and then you can keep that tenor the same, and now you've got the soprano doubled as the root, and then you can just move, or move that, not move, but keep the G as a common tone, and then you still get that nice voice exchange, which would just create that start of the melody. That's voice exchange. Okay, so then we have a G sharp, which obviously doesn't fit in the key of C. So then that's telling us that we have a G sharp here, and it's also a G sharp here because the root of this chord is E, and this sharp is indicating that the 3rd above E is going to be sharped. And that means that we're leading also by a 4th up here to A. So this is going to indicate that we're moving to A major, or A minor would probably make more sense because it's the relative minor of C. So in this case, if we go to the minor 1, and this is a major 5, we could say, is this previous chord a pivot chord, or is this, well, this one can't be a pivot chord because clearly it's a G sharp, which doesn't fit in the key of C. So then you're like, okay, well, is this a pivot chord? And because this would also be a 5-6, meaning we've already started to transition here into A minor at this point. The issue here is that if you were to do a pivot chord here and say, how does G function in the key of A, you could make this a 7. And that would be okay. You could pivot from 7, but 5 to 7 isn't a great pivot chord because moving to the 5 in the new key. And the only reason that it would be better to just make this a chromatic modulation is because the modulation occurs right here. And it's moving in the bass by half step chromatically. And so therefore, this is a chromatic modulation. So you don't even need a pivot chord in this case. You can literally just be like, okay, we're switching to A minor right here. The G, which is the 5th of C, goes up a half step, which becomes the leading tone of the new key. And we just chromatically move right into the new key there. It's very smooth. Okay, so then we just have to fill in our chords. Okay, this is a 5 chord, so that means we need G, G, B, and D. I would just move up by step here in the soprano, keep the common tone G here, and then go down by step to a B here. And then you would need E, G sharp, B. So and then we're a 6 chord, it's first inversion triad. So I would double the soprano on the root of the chord. And then you could skip. It's kind of not a great leap to do here, but I would actually skip up here from the B to the E and the tenor. voice, and then you would also skip here to make that modulation clear, and then move down. This is like a little bit awkward, I guess, in the sense that we have all this similar motion, but there's no parallel fifths, there's no parallel octaves. We're clearly moving here. And then we do get the resolution doing contrary motion in the outer voices this way. Going C down to E, we go G sharp up to A. That contrary motion allows us to then keep a common tone here, and then the voice leading going into the new key is actually really smooth. So that's what I would do there. And then we just move down by step to the end in both these voices. G sharp, and then E would stay as a common tone again in the tenor, and then move that down to the third, move this down to the A, and then that G sharp, because it's in an inner voice, it can actually, you can hear that resolution up to the A in the soprano, and therefore you could either triple the root and just have it doubled, or tripled totally, like doubled here, but then with the root also being in the bass, or you could actually do this and go down to the E. Either way is equally fine. And that's what this would sound like in C major. Okay, we have 1, 1, 6, 5, chromatically moving from 5 to the leading tone of the new key, and then 1, 5, 1 in the new key. Now we're in A minor. So hopefully that gives you at least a little bit of how to move to some different keys. This one's obviously pretty easy to do chromatically because it's the same key signature, right? C major and the relative minor, just with that G sharp as a leading tone, it's pretty easy to move between there. But hopefully that'll at least give you some ideas of how to start this process to do a few of these on your own. I'll have the tiered interventions open today, which is Thursday, if you want to join the Zoom or come down to F117. And then this will be your e-learning for Friday, the 16th, and also working on starting your Schubert project. Have a great weekend.